Christians, sometimes I'm going to spiritualize this whole story now. You know, Lazarus was a friend of Jesus. Remember from last week? Jesus called him friend. He was also someone that Jesus loved. Lazarus was a disciple, a believer. He hung out with Jesus. He was good friends with Jesus. And then he died. Jesus resurrects him from the dead. And history tells us that Lazarus goes on to live 30 more years after Jesus resurrects him from the dead. But I got to thinking spiritually, you know what? I think sometimes Christians can wind up back in a tomb again. And that's why I had this picture, this is a tomb. They sometimes would have steps down into the tomb. You notice that Jesus had to yell, "Hey, Lazarus, do you hear me down there in that tomb?" Sometimes Christians can wind up back in the tomb again. Now, I'm speaking from my own personal experience, but I'm sure most of you can probably testify, yeah. It could be depression. It can be depression. It can be anxiety. It can be addictions. That Satan, I kind of view like he wraps you up again in grave clothes. Lazarus was wrapped in grave clothes. And that's the way you feel. Maybe it's relationship issues. Maybe it's a marriage going bad. Maybe it's struggles at college. Maybe it's anguish with kids. There are many things that can cause people to get back in the tomb. It's where Satan gets you. It's maybe the fear of death. Maybe it's a health issue where you're like, suddenly you get fearful of this new diagnosis. 4 years ago, I got this cancer diagnosis, and it's like, yikes. You kind of feel like Satan's putting you into a tomb again. And like all of a sudden this fear of death. You're just going along in life, you're just living, and all of a sudden, cancer. So you're like back in the tomb. Now, here's what the Lord said to me. The Lord was, Joe, instead of worrying about the cancer, what if I told you that I'm coming back in 2 weeks? So, meet with the doctors, go through the treatment, all that stuff. But what if I let you know that I'm returning in 2 weeks? Would that change your attitude on how you're feeling about the diagnosis? I was like, yeah, if I knew you were coming back in 2 weeks, then I wouldn't be so worried. I would be living, Jesus says, I've come that you would live life abundantly, more abundantly. So Jesus was like, tell you what, Joe, why don't you just live each day? Don't worry about tomorrow. Now, don't go overboard. Look, we plan for our retirement. We plan for college education. We plan for a career. But we know that the Lord can change all that if it's the Lord's will. But there's another side that Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. Because today has what? Has enough worry. So the Lord said to me, Joe, I want you to live today as if I'm coming back tomorrow. Does that change your attitude? I think about these sad situation with this plane in D.C. Maybe those people are all worried about retirement, illnesses, what they were going to do tomorrow, the next day, not realizing that they were all going to meet Jesus a lot sooner than they thought. I think about the plane crash in Philadelphia. This kid comes to America to get treatment, to be healthy, to get well, not realizing he doesn't need that treatment because he's going to be the people in that plane are going to be standing before the Lord. So it's like gives you a perspective of like, Jesus, don't worry about, just live each day for the Lord. I think Jesus is weeping over Christians. I think Christians get themselves in the tomb. Christians get themselves depressed, beat up, worried, and Jesus is crying. He's crying, I don't want you to be in that tomb. I set you free from the fear of death and darkness and bondage. I've set you free so you can have an abundant life. And then he says, roll the stone away. So that's what preachers, we roll the stone away 2 times. The first time I roll the stone away is to let you see that Jesus has risen from the dead. Preachers, when we preach the gospel, we're rolling the stone away so that you can see Jesus is alive. But now, Jesus, for Lazarus, for you, I'm rolling the stone away so that for those of you that are in darkness and bondage, you can see Jesus. You can look through the door. You've been in darkness. You've been, just feeling scared to death about, I'm rolling the stone that you can see Jesus. And I want you to hear Jesus calling your name. The Spirit of God calling your name to come out of the tomb, to come out of that depression, to come out of that financial issue, to come out of that bullying at school, to come out. Jesus is calling you. Come out, Lazarus, come out. Now you have to make the first move. I'm surprised that Jesus says, look, he's all wrapped up like a mummy. Go get him. Jesus, no. Lazarus, you come out. You make the first move. I was thinking, that had to be tough for Lazarus. He's wrapped up like a mummy, but he's hearing the voice of Jesus. That's the way people feel, by the way. They feel incapacitated. They feel they can't do anything. They feel stuck. They feel, entangled by the situation Satan's got them in. But Jesus is calling you, come out. And so Lazarus, you got to make the first move, Christians. You got to come out of the grave. Now, once Lazarus comes out of the grave, you'll notice that then Jesus says to the church, he then says to the people, unwrap him. Now we unwrap him. Why didn't they unwrap him inside the tomb? Jesus said, no. He comes out first. He comes out by faith, and then we're going to unwrap him and set him free.